Welcome to Flying Blind on a Rocket Cycle, Customer-Centered Product Strategy for Machine Intelligence. This is a session that was presented at ProductCamp Boston in the fall of 2024. My name's Joe Lamantia, most recently with Amazon, though I'll be talking about work that I did at Oracle and Endeca. I typically focus on product and design leadership, strategy for emerging technology and spaces, and or some combination of the two. There's lots of ways to get in touch, share feedback. I welcome follow-up comments and questions, etc. And here's how you can get a hold of me. So this session is structured as a case study. And what we'll do is hopefully recreate a little bit the experience of flying blind on a rocket cycle, and that's shorthand for working to make a series of decisions that guide the evolution of a set of B2B products in a very fast-moving space that is powered by a rapidly evolving and changing set of technologies. So what I think is clear is that there's some strong parallels between how the generative AI moment and the spotlight on that new layer of capabilities parallels the growth and the evolution of machine intelligence. We'll take a look at the methods and practices, see product strategy and planning in action, and then revisit and consider the business outcomes and the product outcomes from all of the work that we did to build and grow a portfolio of analytics products and services. Along the way, we'll get to see customer-centered product strategies as they're crafted, look at how a portfolio comes together over time through a series of investments, and hopefully this will showcase how we can establish effective, innovative, customer-centered product strategy capabilities and practices. This story starts when Oracle buys Endeca, Cambridge-based startup. It was one of the largest acquisitions that Oracle had made at the time, a bit over $1 billion, I believe the fifth or sixth largest acquisition. And after we did the inevitable, which was to integrate our products, and here you see a quick snapshot of the rebranded information discovery offerings that Endeca put into the market, we faced the inevitable question that all acquisitions do, which is, now what? And so, of course, we were part of a much larger product development group and function. Oracle had about 35,000 people in product development alone at the time. And we needed to chart a course for ourselves, both for our current products and offerings, and then for the group overall. Before we dive in, I think there's two things that are really key to know and understand on product strategy overall. I think often it looks essentially a little bit like this. This is the Underpants Gnomes from South Park, early in the South Park run, in fact. And essentially what this says is the story is often, well, folks have aspirations and they have some ideas, but they're not quite sure how to bridge between and realize those aspirations based on those ideas. And that's the role of product strategy, is to chart a course from your aspiration and your idea. Often, here's a quick model that I grabbed, you'll see product strategy is approached or thought of sort of like this, right? And so there's a business strategy that's the key driver, and then you move through a couple of steps and you have this terminal output, which is a roadmap, and that guides maybe what you're building or not building, or what you're offering in the near term, the midterm, and the long term. Nothing wrong with this. It's certainly better than nothing, but I think this shines a light on what's really key to know about product strategy, and that it's actually a cycle. I show it this way. In a simplified form, it's essentially a series of decisions that you're going to make about some key questions. So opportunity assessment, product discovery, planning and management for that product and that portfolio, and then what, when, where, and how will you invest. And then the second thing that we should know is there's really only one rule, and that rule is ABC, always be customer-centered. And that's from Glengarry Glen Ross. So if you bring that whole story together, what you'll hear today is essentially this, that if you're going to do product strategy, think of it as a cycle, think of it as a series of decisions facing those four different perspectives, and then approach it in a customer-centered fashion. And we'll see how that plays out here. Often, you'll have a business strategy that's driving what you might formulate or the questions that you need to answer in terms of product strategy. This is Marty Kagan explaining how it works, and he says, well, essentially, how do you deliver on the business strategy? So in this case, we had clearly identified one, and our business strategy was to continue the focus that we had had for our product making while a startup, and that was to offer analytics tools for emerging spaces. And in simple business strategy terms, that had worked. We got bought, so we decided to extend that. Emerging spaces, of course, have unique characteristics. And I think, again, this is visible when we look out and see what's happening in the generative AI space and around the current wave of AI. There's a lot of discussion of, is this a foundational technology? Will it change everything? How is it going to work out in the end? What you can see there are, of course, moments of hype and then chaos, right? And the question is, well, what can or how can you approach that? And that's where I think that if you are strongly, consistently customer-centered, actually, you can navigate a hype space, an emerging space. You can cut through and manage that hype and that chaos, and you can achieve clarity, speed, timing, momentum, and make impactful decisions much more consistently. So let's look at that first part of the cycle, which is opportunity assessment. Here's Kagan again suggesting there's some fundamental questions that you have to answer. And when you zoom in, some of those early and key questions are, well, is there really a large opportunity here? And then who has that problem? What's the target market? Who is the customer? Or what is the customer? So in this case, from tracking the space for some time, we chose to focus on data scientists. And if you remember, there was quite a bit of hype and definitely some chaos around the role of data science and the nature of the practices for data science at the time. We summarized essentially what product strategy would do or accomplish this way. This is actually from the business leader that I was working with who chartered this effort. He said, get in the heads of data scientists and be the spirit of the product. And that's what the product strategy will do. So how do you do that? We launched a pretty comprehensive investigation. We touched on sort of all aspects of data science as a practice, right? So the workflow, the tooling, the data that folks are working with, the various analytical practices, how their projects ran, right? And in terms of how we actually executed this, I defined a combination of what I will call continuous learning and lean strategy. And that was essentially a recurring, incremental, iterative cycle of very quick opportunity assessment and product discovery efforts. We ran on a 1 to 2 week sprint cycle, and we were focused in each of these on a particular outcome. And you'll see, just as we look ahead, some of those outcomes in terms of maybe the typical artifacts or the standard set of questions you would answer. So what's the value chain? Define the landscape of customers. How are they segmented? What personas, jobs, and roles do they perform? What capabilities do they need? Can you model the domain overall and how it works and the tooling that is relevant? This is a quick collage of a lot of the maybe interim tools and representative outcomes that we used for each of those hypothesis-driven sprint cycles. And so you'll see here we did a lot of qualitative interviewing. We distilled the essence of analytical workflow. We took in primary, secondary, and summary sources on how data science jobs and roles were evolving. We went to conferences. I spent a lot of time getting to know data science and data scientists. Down on the corner there, you'll see a workflow diagram that ends up being useful later. This was a space that was evolving to some extent transparently, so out in the open. And so it was possible, if you weren't a practitioner or you weren't part of the analytical domain, though we were, it was possible to sort of see and watch data science evolve almost in real time. And here are some of the models, pictures, or learnings that we took away. And so we'll touch on a lot of these as we move ahead. The idea that we were able to establish a pretty comprehensive portrait through a quick series of incremental learning efforts focused on data science. The real unlock happened for us when we borrowed from the activity-centered design toolkit. And so really emphasizing that idea of being customer-centered and actually looking at what customers do on an everyday basis or need to do as they're going through life and working on their jobs. This is Don Norman, first VP of UX at Apple way back in 1992 or 1993. He's one of the folks, if you Google activity-centered design, you'll see his name come up. There are many others who have contributed to the field. And in this case, the key leverage tool for us was a very zoomed in close view of analytical work itself. And so as data scientists, we're going about driving their recommendations, creating predictive models, essentially answering the questions that business had. We looked very closely at step-by-step how that worked and what happened in there. And that allowed us to simplify and build a picture of a very interesting overlap. And that was between data analysis as a space of activity. And you can see a little bit of the particulars for data analysis there in terms of what folks are doing or what they need to accomplish. And then data engineering, and then see the overlap or the intersection of these different roles, right? And again, fast moving space. So the nature of data engineering, the technology, the tooling, the business requirements, et cetera, are changing very quickly and in a form of coevolution with what was happening on the analysis side. We boil all of this down into an essence, and this is actually a slideware that I shared with business leaders at the time when I was reading out on do we see opportunity here? And we had seen some key characteristics. So there's a tremendous amount of challenge with data. A lot of time and effort goes into working with and around data. These are very large volumes of data. So if you remember the business card that we flashed at the beginning, suggested that the product group had become identified as the leading center of big data expertise for Oracle at the time. And then there's a different set of analytics and tooling that's happening here. So some of those machine intelligence techniques, which we'll see mentioned later. All this adds up to the idea that there's a new role or a couple of new roles that have emerged, and they have new practices and new needs. And given the speed, the impact, the volume of the market, and the size, this tells us, yes, there is opportunity here. But that's not a product. And so putting on that product discovery hat, what we do then is zoom in, and here you're looking for what I've heard folks sometimes describe as leverageable pain or monetizable pain. And this is where you could provide benefit and value to someone or to a group of people or a customer segment in a way that specifically addresses something that's hard or difficult or challenging for them to do. So in addition to it's valuable, it's also difficult. And in this case, zooming in again, we were able to spot what we looked at and saw as a really key potential for product around the idea of wrangling. And wrangling is, this is a robust description. It's kind of a user scenario written by a couple of leading data scientists at the time that walk you through what wrangling is. It's iterative data exploration and transformation specifically to enable large-scale analysis. And when we zoomed in and looked really closely at what was happening here through one of those discovery cycles, we found what we thought were keynote problems. Here's a quick picture of how data scientists themselves would represent or show what was happening during wrangling. So they're cleansing, they're merging, they're adapting, they're doing visualization, right? They're looking for leverageable findings, et cetera. There were some key characteristics of their tool set, and so those are described. And you can see that essentially it's a very highly fragmented tool set. And even though we do wrangling across the different stages of analysis, and when you're close in, you have an itemized view of where, what, and how your interim steps contribute, there's nothing really that supports wrangling specifically as an activity. And so we thought, well, maybe we found something that's leverageable from a product perspective. And again, wearing that activity-centered design hat, really using that customer-centered perspective, we were able to distill a simplified model of analysis in the activity and the tools that were supporting it now. This is the messy whiteboard that I put together to sort of pull all of this into a synthesized form. And what we noticed here, you'll see there's three key activities: exploration, analysis, and transformation. Those were mentioned in those narratives. That's what we were hearing from all those interviews with data science and analytics folks. But there wasn't really a good place or way to represent wrangling. And we thought, well, this is a key characteristic, right, of what they need to do that's missing. So I built, again, a simplified model to show the relationship of these different activities or these capabilities. And this is the actual slideware, and the idea that it looks pretty simple because it came together pretty quickly is meant to capture that notion of, again, working very iteratively and incrementally through a fast moving space. So the idea was, once we had that insight that we had a good leverageable model for what the tools needed to be doing and how these different activities related, then we could carry that forward pretty quickly. So you can see here, we're showing that these separate activities powered by different tools are actually interconnected. You're exploring, you're analyzing, you're wrangling, you're augmenting. There's a reason for that, right? And when we looked at what and how folks were doing specifically, we saw interestingly that all of the descriptions and the self-curated tool sets that people would put together combined exploration and wrangling together as the most useful combination of activities. And then likewise, they complemented that with analysis and augmentation. And if you spend time in the data space, then you'll know that there are definitely very different nuances for what you do, the tooling, the activities, and the relationships between these different tasks. We'll see some of that play out shortly. So this again was a very useful unlock for us because we had a simplified, distilled readout of the core capabilities for data discovery that data science and analysts would need. And we were able to look at and see the relationship between what we call those capabilities and enhancing capabilities. And that's stuff like workflow and versioning and acceleration and collaboration. It's all of the connective pieces, if you will, or components or elements that allow you to very quickly acquire access and work with data and then publish or operationalize your outcome. Did you find a particular set of insights that were key? Did you create a robust data model, et cetera? So we had a common picture then of what was happening and the key capabilities. And again, we realized it's actually a cycle. So this is not a linear path. It's not a one-time true series of activities that go through in stepwise projection. It's a cycle. And we are able to, remember I'd said that that workflow would come back. This was from Ben Lorica, who was at O'Reilly at the time. He did a simplified version of this. We're actually able to suggest we see a repeated cycle of activities that are interconnected. We can call that the discovery cycle. And you can see here that when we zoom in, we can actually say, oh, there's structure to this. There's things that happen first, and then there's things that happen second, and they're related. And so we built this model after the fact to guide additional tool making and product definition. But there's actionable structure here from a product sense. So then what will we do about it in that planning and portfolio management view? Well, what this gives us is essentially a set of new capabilities for a new product category. And so we can say, oh, we have a good sense of looking ahead how visual discovery and analysis tools will evolve. And you can see there, if you zoom in and look at those particulars, that we're able to describe and define what analyzing data is and exploring data sets, how wrangling works, what synthesis is needed, how people publish, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this tells us not just a product, but a category. So what will we do for this? One of the things that you need to know and understand is, well, is there anything happening in the space already? So this is Kagan again, and we're sort of working down that list of 10 fundamental questions. In this case, we're going to look at, well, what's happening in the market now, and are there competitors? What do those competitors do and offer? And again, trying to work very quickly because it's a fast-moving space, what we were able to do was leverage that model of capabilities, and you can see those highlighted there on the left, essentially map out the whole landscape of tooling across different categories. So maybe you were using a big enterprise analytics platform. Maybe you were working with open source technology. Maybe you were using a series of smaller products and product packages that you were combining together. If you look at that inset there, maybe you see and recognize what's called a Wardley map. That's from Simon Wardley. And if this landscape view, based on those capabilities, is reminding you of a Wardley map, then gold star for you. You have seen some of the inspiration for this customer-centered take on essentially not just a technology stack, but on the whole collection of possible technology stacks. And so with that, we were able to, again, use that distilled readout of the key capabilities and analyze, right, or compare or profile some of the companies and the products and the tools and the offerings that were either in the space or that we thought were maybe relevant to the space. So you'll see here, and this works visually, again, these slides came together quickly when we were able to get that unlock on the model to use for reference. We can suggest, well, Paxata and Trifacta have a focus on wrangling capability. But there's nothing really good for exploration that's on the market now. And so, what does this mean for us, right? Well, there are some wave one wrangling tools in the market now. Likewise, if we look at two More established, well-known names, Alteryx had a longer history, Datamir was a bit newer. We can see that they focus on that augmentation part of the overall bucket of capabilities. They have some modest offerings for exploration, and then they're not really strong or covering the basis for those other two analysis and wrangling spaces. Again, if we look at Click, another product with long-standing history in the space, and some of these names may be familiar if you're in the BI or the enterprise analytics landscape, we could see that they have a particular profile of capabilities, but they're not covering the whole picture. Likewise, with maybe some newer entrants like Platfora or folks who are focused more visually, we call them analysis tools like Tableau. I assume that that's a name that folks may recognize and possibly even have done some work with. So what we could see is that in the view of customers, and this is literally a quote from a data scientist, that there's a gap. This tool set is not essentially constructed correctly around their model and way of working. And they will even tell you, what do we need? So here we see the ideal system would provide integrated tools across that whole set of capabilities. Again, just for reference, we were able to build a sort of template or a recurring model that captured the pattern of what was good and not good about tools based on did they help you move faster through that cycle of activities or not. And it looked like we saw a clear pattern where gaps between tools, people would lean on those enhancing capabilities. So I have to publish from one tool to provide and to power, a tool that I use at the next set, right, of activities. So at the next stage. And it's those enhancing capabilities that mean you can or can't integrate easily. And your ability to integrate across and between those different fragmented tools is what drives, can you move through the cycle at all as an analyst? And can you do it quickly? How effectively? What kind of insights? What's the quality of insights, et cetera? So essentially, there's a ton of friction in there. We could model that structurally and then look for, well, what product would we put together? So we were able, again, to, using that set of capabilities, pretty quickly zoom in on what we thought of as V1 for compelling product. And in that case, BDD1X, creatively named Big Data Discovery, because that was the cost center label that we had inside Oracle at the time, would combine exploration and wrangling focused on data quality, and then offer some analysis capabilities as well. We weren't going to touch in a deep fashion the need for augmentation because the specific patterns of workflow that we had seen led us to believe that this was the best place to get started. And of course, you can't build everything all at once, but you need to make sure that you're able to fulfill a value prop and offer something that's valuable. So then how would that evolve? So V1X, the next version of the new product, would reinforce and complement those capabilities for exploration and wrangling with robust analysis tools. And then specifically to overcome that friction from the need to integrate and actually complete the cycle of discovery, what we offered was, or planned to offer, was a set of easy plugins, if you will, right, or easy integration with external tools that were focused on and capable in that augmentation space that we didn't think that we'd build out right away. If you look at that definition of wrangling, what you can see again, and this is the voice of customers, they say the outcome is not just data, it's an editable and auditable transcript of transformations coupled with a nuanced understanding of the organization and data quality issues. So essentially you have to be able to recreate and tell the story of the data that you analyzed and worked with and how it changed in order to justify your confidence measure for the machine learning model's predictions, right? What's going to come out on the backside. And this was what allowed us to essentially look ahead and say, well, what do we think the complete sort of fully constituent product would be? And again, not a coincidence, it would in fact offer that comprehensive set of capabilities. And so we say, okay, well, what will version 2 look like? It'll have that full set of capabilities, exploration, analysis, wrangling, and augmentation. So what this gives us is a definition and an evolution path for that product category. So how essentially will we see the product category play out? Wave 1 of visual discovery and analysis tools will look like this, right? And then we can project ahead and look at potentially the relationship of this new category to maybe existing categories. And you can see some dynamics emerging like, well, if people don't have a traditional BI tool or traditional analytic technologies and products aren't able to address the needs that they have for data science, then what actually we might do is look to get you started on the ladder or enter the base of the pyramid with a visual discovery and analysis tool. And then over time, the capabilities of that tool and then the value that you get out of it could progress. And so maybe you're displacing or growing to complement and augment that very large existing category of business analytics.